Hello friends, today we have a new video and the topic of the video today is basically um, it's going to revolve around a very often talked about technique called activation of a house, or when you want to do a remedy of a house. People are quite confused between the concept what is remedy versus what is activation. It's a good question, but remedy and activation should be looked upon in a way where basically you're not looking at uh, it in the form that am I activating a house, am I giving a remedy for the house. Look at it like energies. If I give a certain energy to a certain house by doing certain karma or a deed, what are the results going to be? And then I think people would get probably a better idea as to what is activation versus what is remedy. Maybe this will be another video in some upcoming series somewhere. But today what we're going to do is, if suppose you want to activate a certain house, uh, there's an often, not so often actually talked about technique called the activation of the ninth house from a certain house to basically activate the luck for that house. There is a secret behind this, why basically the ninth house is important. And if you look at Nadi astrology, the 159, the Trikona houses from any house are basically considered in unison. And they become they form a very important part of the triangle of energies basically. So why does this happen? We'll talk about it gradually over subsequent videos. But then today we're just going to talk about the house ninth from a particular house and how it helps activate the energy of a certain house. Now the question is, why the ninth house? The reason is, it's very simple. If you look at the fourth house and if you look at the ninth house, it's the mother and the father which get together to produce a child. So if you look at the mother, which is the fourth house, and if you look at the father, which is the ninth house, together they produce the first house, which is the child, which is the horoscope, which is your horoscope or the horoscope of the person you are going to study. So what's indirectly happening when the father decides? I mean, when the blessing of being a father, or basically, uh, when the blessing basically moves from the ninth house to the fourth house, the first house gives results. Okay. Indirectly, what that means is when the ninth house is activated. So why is it basically activated? Some energy is provided, some blessing is moving in that particular direction. Then the first house can basically come and get activated. So the ninth house blessing is needed when the father has decided that okay, I need to have a child and I'm going to raise a child. That is when basically the first house gets activated. So ninth house moves to the first house, and similarly, when the first house decides to have progeny ahead, that's when the fifth house gets activated. So every house activates the house fifth from itself. It looks at it as its own child. So this is an old Lal Kitab principle also, that the ninth from a house is the basis of that particular house, and the fifth of the house from a particular house is taken care of like the progeny itself of that house. So now, so why is the ninth house necessary? Look at it in this way. A house ninth to a particular house is called the Bhagya of that house. It's the luck of that house. It's so say, if you are to be an astrologer and if you were to be a successful astrologer, your 12th house has to be good. Why? Because fourth house is the population or the local population of the people who are going to get in touch with you, and the ninth from the fourth, which is the 12th house, is basically the Bhagya of that population. So if the population is lucky, if locally people are basically lucky to have their Bhagya good enough, then they'll come to you and basically have the readings done. So the 12th house needs to be good. 12th house needs to be strong for basically a person to be able to open a maybe a training center or some kind of a consultancy, or you can say some kind of a way of being able to basically provide consultation to other people or guidance to other people. So let's move back to the 1-9 concept, which is the ninth to a particular house is the blessing of that house, and without that blessing, things will not move. uh, Ninth is also the guru, ninth is also the teacher, ninth is also the boss. So these are multiple, you can say, portfolios that the ninth from particular house possesses. You can say ninth is the divine initiation or the blessing or the grace needed for that particular house to basically get activated. Now, the question is, what karma should you initiate for the bhagya of that house to get activated? So, how to make blessings flow towards that house so that automatically, things start happening. So, if I was to feel lucky, what would I typically do? So, if I am the lagna, the first house, then typically I would go to a temple, say the ninth house, or typically I would go to a guru or my father, get their blessings, so that when the blessing moves towards me, I start feeling lucky. Good things start happening to me, and I get the freedom and the you can say the luckiness to be able to make things move my way. See, ultimately, when things happen and move in your direction, somebody has to emotionally decide or logically decide or whatever. Some decision has to be made so that the souls around you or people around you move in the way you want things to move, for the universe to move along with you. That is Bhagya. So when somebody says, okay, he's a luckier person than the other person, so basically things move in that person's direction more than what they move in the other person's. So in that person's direction, who's basically not that lucky. So now, having understood the essence of the concept, now let's look at some of the ways in which basically this energy can move. So what do you need to do to activate a certain house? Now, the first house is also basically, it's basically the person himself, the you can say the kundali of the person who's basically come to you, that you're looking at that person's chart. Now, if a person has to become more lucky in life, then basically what does a person do? How do things start moving in his direction? How do basically events, nature, forces of nature, that you can say, start moving in his direction? That's when he's lucky, when he's blessed, when his ninth house of Bhagya has opened up. And what you can do to basically start feeling that lucky is basically go and get blessings from the temple, which is basically the ninth house. So if first house is to be activated, you have to improve your personality. If you have to become bolder in life, you have to feel lucky in life, go to a temple, which is another ninth house thing. Go and offer prayers. Basically, when you pray, you're activating your ninth house as well as Jupiter. So not only your Jupiter, but your ninth house is also going to get activated. uh, that is going to attract blessings to self. So ninth house is basically any kind of a divine force, which can come in the form of a guru, which can come in the form of a deity, which can come in the form of all the powerful spirits that stay in temple or any religious place. So when you invoke them, when you pray to them, those their blessing starts moving to you, towards you. Now overall, your luck and things, they start to move freely. You start feeling more lucky. But then, does this concept apply apart from the first house? Does it apply to other houses? Let's have a look. So let's look at the second house. The second house is your Dhana, honor, savings, the resources that you have in your life. Now, uh, if you were to apply the simple sutra, ninth from the second would be the 10th house. So that means the more I activate my 10th house, or the more I basically try to do karma related to the 10th house, my second house should get stronger. I should feel luckier with respect to my dhan, my honor, my savings, my wealth. So what does that mean? That means 10th house, which is your karma sthana, also called the office or the place of doing your deeds. Basically, that is where the sun gets digbal. So that area which is basically getting the most visibility. So fourth house is complete darkness, and 10th house opposite to it is complete something where is a time around afternoon, which is around 12 to 1. The closer you are to the equator, you will see that around 12 to 1 is the time when basically the sun is actually at the top. So that's a part where basically you get maximum visibility in your life. So when you start working, you can say, with the feeling of nishkama karma. What is nishkama karma? Basically, when you're doing work in a selfless way as a duty without expecting anything in return, which is humanly slightly impossible, but then still, that's what divine guidance is. When you start doing selfless duty towards others, say when you start working without an ulterior motive in your office, in your place of work, you will start seeing that your second house, which is the house of your honor, your savings, your wealth, your capacity to be able to earn, your capacity to be able to hoard or hoard the resources that you need in your life, it will start going up. And 10th house is basically not only just karma with respect to the office, it is karma in general, where you get visibility, where basically you do stuff not for the sake of just a salary, but it's not exactly charity, but it's karma that you do, which is the right thing to do, without any selfish, you can say, gains that you're expecting at the end of the day. The more you start doing it, I mean, just look at it in this way. When in an office, you start taking more responsibility, when you start doing things with a sense of duty and with a sense of helping other people out without expecting many things back, um, well, you may not get the visibility, you may not get recognized, but then nature is going to reward you with all the rewards. Your earning capacity is going to go up. Somewhere down the line, it is going to get recognized. Your second house is going to get the blessings from all the people whom you have helped in your office, to basically now support you in your efforts so that you start going up in life. Now let's look at the third house. Now what is third house? Third house is the house of new initiatives, parakram, or you can say valor, and entry. Now what does entry mean? When new people start coming in your life, new friends start coming in your life, in your social circle, social circle on a day-to-day communication basis, when new people start coming in, that's basically called an entry point, or you can say a meeting place, or you can say a place where you socially interact with other people. So that's the third house. Now, how does the bhagya related, or you can say the luck related to the 11th house, how can that be increased? I mean, how can I activate, make my third house more luckier? So basically, start activating the 11th house. Now 11th house is also the house of desires, but before we get there, let's just look in a more, you can say, calculatable way. 11th house is also the house of large organizations or huge celebrations or huge group celebrations. So like Kumbh Mela, which is again something like 11th house event, or you can say um, Google used to organize something called the Burning Man, where basically huge number of people would go make an artificial city right in the middle of Nevada, the desert, and basically then burn it down at the end of the day. So when you start being a part of these large organizations, large groups, you will see more people entering your life. The blessings of, I mean, you start working with them, you start interacting with them, you start helping them achieve their desires, they start helping you achieve your desires, and you'll see that new people will start coming into your life, which is again a third house thing. If you start basically 11th house is also the house of your cousins. 11th house is also the house of desires, not only your desires, the desires of the group. So the more you help others achieve their desires, they are going to basically come and basically going to have new opportunities, new initiatives open up in your life. When you become a part of a larger group, I mean, definitely your valor and your strength and your bravery is going to go up. Why? Because now you have a bigger support system behind you to help you. So that's another way to basically increase the luck of your third house. So this is just a food for thought. These are not exactly, you can say, remedies, but then to make a house luckier, these are some of the things that you can do or incorporate in your life. Let's move to the fourth house. Now, fourth house is also called the Sukha sthana, or the or the place which basically gives you the most mental peace. It's the house. It's the fourth house of nourishment. It's the fourth house of your land, your home, your vehicles, things that give you basically support, nutrition, peace of mind, protection. That's what the fourth house stands for. And how does the fourth house become luckier? So to make fourth house luckier, start activating the 12th house, which is the ninth from the fourth. So the moment you start doing donations, charity, 12th house is also the house of temples, but those temples which are situated remotely. So ninth house could be a house, could be a temple which is right next to your house, or maybe even in your own house itself, if you were to look at a Vastu perspective. But 12th house is those temples which are located remotely, far away. I mean, you can't see them with your. I mean, temples which do not fall in your line of sight from your house or your place of residence. They're far away from your city. Those are the 12th house religious places. Now, once you start doing donations, you start doing charity, once you start going to these kind of temples, start getting the blessings of those places, you will start seeing a lot of peace coming in your life. You will start seeing that since through donations you have brought help and peace and charity to other people, you start seeing these things, a very strong system of nourishment, peace, happiness will start entering your life. So again, 12th house is also the house of creative work. It's also the house of bed pleasures. And these are all things which in different ways bring peace to you. 12th house is also the house of independent decision making. The more you start taking independent decisions, you will see there is more peace coming to your mind. And this is because of the activation of 12th house, which basically brings, it starts bringing the blessings into the fourth house. Um, so once you start getting a hang of this concept, you start seeing that a lot of remedies may not work with activation of that particular house, but maybe with the activation of the house ninth from itself. So going ahead, let's move to the fifth house. Now, what is the fifth house? I mean, fifth house is your education, your authority, your power over other people, even your pitris. It's concept which basically the concept of pitris is very important because First house is you, ninth house is your father, and the fifth house is ninth to ninth, which is your father's father. But cumulatively, it is also basically, you can say, the entire graph of people or tree of people which represent your lineage. They may or may not be alive, but then that entire, fifth house is also called the Ishta Devta. Uh, uh, the Devta or the deity which your kul or basically your lineage is basically um, descendants from. So once you basically, so what's the relationship between the fifth house and the first house? So let's come to that. What you'll see that Bhagya related to your education, your power, your authority, even to your Pitris is dependent on you. This is the ninth from the fifth house, which is yourself. I mean, first house is not only the house of new beginnings or things which get initiated, it's also the house of focus. If you see the first house, the name is called Lagna. Lagna means Lagan. Lagan means where is your mind focused. So in Hindi you would say आपकी लगन कहाँ लगी हुई है. So where are you focused in life? Now the more focused you are in life, the more you are activating your first house. So focus is also something which is a Martian portfolio, which is basically a sign of Aries. So the more you activate your focus, your lagna, you'll see that your focus getting better, your education will start getting better. Fifth house is also the as Laghu Parashari says, the sthan of tapa, the place of tapa. Tapa means penance. The more you're able to focus, the more tapa, or you can say spiritual aura, you will start getting. The more authority you will start getting over people. Now, authority here is not just authority in terms of being a government power, but authority in general. So in olden times, people would not judge you by your position, that this is a blah 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 position that you have in government, that's why you have authority. No. If you're a person who has done a lot of spiritual penance, if you're a person who's highly educated, you have an aura of your own, you have tap which you have done of your own accord, which gives you that power and authority. So they could be a policeman, or they could be a person highly powerful, or you can say with the government. But then if you're a person who's done a lot of tap, you will see that your aura or your power will actually overrule or override the person who's actually sitting in power. So so fifth house is not just the throne. The fifth house is also your spiritual power, and this is something which gets derived from your lineage as well, which is again a fifth house thing. So the more you are able to focus, the more you bring your own personality in control, the more you basically take initiatives. So third house is also initiatives, but first house is also the house of new beginnings. The more you're able to begin things on your own and keep your focus and complete them, the more you will see your fifth house of tap will start getting stronger. That's where Bhagya basically starts getting better. I'll cover basically this connection of the first, fifth, and ninth house in another section as to how they're related, and how your 10th house is also related to pending karma because of the 159 connection. Uh, but before that, I would say the fifth house is very important when it comes to your purva punya, but then there is pending karma which remains to be done before that purva punya can actually be unlocked. And what that means, we'll come to that maybe in another video. Okay, so moving on to the sixth house. Uh, Now, sixth house, as you know, is the house of Roga, Rina, Shatru. What is Roga? Diseases. Rina is basically a debt, and Shatru is basically your enemies. Now, how are they related to the house 9 from itself? So, see, uh, the more you start activating your second house, or the more you make your second house stronger, the blessings of the second house will start flowing to the sixth house. What does that mean? See, your second house is your larger family, it's your resources, it's also your strength. I mean, the second sign, Taurus, the sign is bull. Now, why is that a bull? The bull is, the more resources you have, the more powerful you are, the more bodily strong you are, and the more strength you have, the more stamina you will have basically. So second house is also your energy reserves, and also how you see things. I mean, the second house is the eyes, so your face typically becomes the part of the second house. So what is your approach to seeing different kind of things? And when I mean, the first house may be the focus, it's the sheer energy you bring to the table, but second house is basically how you see things, how you visualize things, and how you solve them, what methodology you adopt, how you see things. Do you see them in a bad way, do you see them in a good way? These are some of the things which come with the second house. Now, the stronger a second house you have, say if you have a larger family because of benefic sitting over there, definitely you'll be able to overcome a lot of your Shatru, which is basically your enemies, because you have larger reserves of people who are going to support you, fight your problems. If Second house, if you have some malefic sitting there and you have good amount of wealth, you're gonna see that okay, when it comes to Rina, or which is debt, you'll be able to fight these better. Second house, again, your nutrition, what you eat. So if you are able to basically keep your nutrition and your diet better, you're going to basically take care of your health and health problems, which is sixth house issue, in a much better way. So you're automatically doing karma, which is making you more blessed in terms of being able to handle sixth house matters. So this is how some of these energies work. The reason I'm basically sharing these energies the way they work is so that you get a rough idea as to how energies are moving between the trines and how the blessing is actually flowing. Okay, moving on to the seventh house. So seventh house is the house of partners, public platform. It's also called the Jaya Sthan. Now, what is Jaya Sthan? Jaya is basically victory. So if you look at the literal transliterated meaning, it's basically the meaning of victory. Now, what does victory mean? When you proclaim victory, you do it in a public audience, or you can say on a public platform in front of everybody else that you have been victorious in a certain way. So when you have had a duel, or you have had an open enemy of yours, which is again a seventh house thing, basically some kind of a duel has happened, some battle has happened. Typically, you will see even court cases that happen, which is again a 1-7 axis event. You will see that you will proclaim your victory, and that is where the seventh house comes into being. But then, how do you make your seventh house get activated, and how do you make the blessings flow so that the seventh house starts working more favorably for you? How do you activate it? So for that, you'll see the Bhagya of the seventh house is related to the third house. Now, what is third house? uh, Third house is your parakram, your bravery, your valor. Third house is also basically how you communicate. So when you show your valor, you basically raise your voice. Before you actually pick up the arms, which is again the third house thing, you raise your voice. uh, if you got a good voice, great, you can fight your battles vocally. But sometimes you have to pick up your strengths. But then the more you are able to fight and better skilled you are, the luckier you become in terms of being able to win on a public platform, or make your Jaya Sthan, or the place of victory, more powerful. Now, seventh house is also the house of partners. It's also the house of public platform. And the better you are in terms of, you can say, so when do you get better partners, or you can say not just marriage partners, but you can say business partners, because seventh house is the house of transactions, liaising, deal making. In Hindi, they call it dalali. When does it become better? When the third house of daily transactions, which is lane dein, gets better. So 3, 7, 11 are kama houses, which basically uh, where transactions happen. Third house is daily transactions, seventh house is transactions with business partners or with big parties, and 11th house is transactions or desires that you fulfill with big organizations, or people who are placed in a very higher up kind of a position, or those desires which are desires which are um, which are ones which are keeping you away from moksha, which is again a 12th house thing. So the more you take new initiatives, or the more your daily transactions are better, you will see that your seventh house basically gets stronger and stronger. Third house is also the people who enter your life. So as I've already talked about the third house portfolio, those people who make some kind of new entry, your social circle, the more they come into your life, you'll see the more partnerships, better partnerships you'll be able to make, because you're interacting with more people. So your seventh house starts getting luckier. The luck starts coming to your seventh house. So moving on to the eighth house, which is a very tricky house. Uh, Now eighth house, I mean, what are the portfolios? You can see Samadhi, which exactly is not a very direct way of seeing it. Typically, eighth house is the house which is linked with cremations, funerals, anything which dies and transforms, and the material form of which changes. So your physical form will change. Transformation, even legacies, wills, insurances, chit funds, mutual funds, what you want to talk about, or group investments, or people investing in multiple people getting together and investing their money together. Uh, it all comes from the eighth house. Now, the bhagya of the eighth house comes from the fourth house, and it's slightly tricky. So let me come to the actual words which are used for the fourth house. Now, fourth house is the Sukha sthan. Sukh means peace. Sukh means happiness. So how are these concepts linked? Now, for a person to enter a state of samadhi, You have to be at peace, which is your fourth house. The more you are at peace, the luckier you become in terms of being able to now dissolve your identity and be able to transform yourself. If you're a highly disturbed person, trust me, I mean, you can't get into Samadhi. I mean, 12th house is the house of, you can say, Moksha, which is the final liberation. But then before you get to Moksha, you have to get into Samadhi, which is the 8th house thing. Until you're not at peace, you will see that this transformation cannot happen. Many times you will see most transformations that come in life come under very adverse circumstances. But then most people who have been saints, most people who have had spiritual transformations, have had mothers, again a fourth house thing, uh, uh, who have somehow backed them up, who have spiritually been strong enough or peaceful enough to have supported them in a way so that the blessing of the mother goes to the child and the child is able to undergo the transformation. Now, another thing which basically is not very directly visible from the fourth and eighth house connection is fourth house is the mother and eighth house is the mother's womb. So basically, uh, for a child to be delivered, an eighth house thing to happen, the mother has to basically bless the child that, okay, I want to bless this child and have this child come in life. So, eighth house is the period of pregnancy. So, till the mother's blessing is not there, that yes, I want to bear this child, the eighth house is not going to basically work properly. So coming back to eighth house, now eighth house is also the house of insurances, wills, legacy, inheritance. If you have something in the fourth house, you can say if you are at peace with the assets in the fourth house, in the sense you have assets to have, then only if your parents have assets, if your father has assets, if your mother has assets, if you stay in a house, which is again a fourth house thing, that is what you will inherit. So if the blessing of the fourth house is not there, you don't have a house, you are staying in a rented place, you're not going to get any inheritance. So things which are giving you happiness and peace, which is basically the fourth house, if they don't exist, you're not going to get into the inheritances in life. Another thing which basically people miss, if second house is the house of cash, moon, which is the fourth house thing, also stands for cash, because moon and Venus, both of them stand for liquidity. So till you do not have some kind of, you can say, uh, cash at hand or resources or assets at hand which give you peace, again, uh, you're not going to have any inheritance left in the eighth house. Now, another thing which people kind of may or may not be aware of, that the fourth house or the moon also stands for Lord Shiva. And why? Because I cannot quote 100% for this, but then there are references to it in many places, including Lal Kitab and some other classic texts, that uh, moon has both the male as well as female characteristics. Why? Because moon in general stands for the mother, but then moon in many of the uh, uh, mythical stories basically comes out as a king, as a male king. Now, what that means is moon exhibits in different places both the characteristics of the male as well as the female. And Shiva, as you know, is basically called the Ardhanarishwar. So moon is also considered an optimization, or basically you can say one way of basically Shiva's energy to come forth. So till 8th house is also the house of death, transformation. Till Shiva's blessing is not there, you cannot be born or you cannot die. So basically, till the fourth house, the moon is not basically blessing you. Your eighth house, your combination is not going to happen. Your time of death is not going to come. So you see the link, the way it's happening. So the more you are able to pray to Lord Shiva, the more you are able to basically, get the blessings of your mother. You'll see transformation and your fear of death actually getting overcome. Anyways, coming to the ninth house. Ninth house is the house of Bhagya, higher education, also your gurus, also your father, and basically your own luck, how lucky you feel in life. Now, the ninth house itself, the Bhagya of the Bhagya itself, is in the hand of the fifth house. Now, which is the fifth house? The fifth house, the Pitris. The fifth house is also basically, so who are the Pitris? The Pitris are your forefathers. So, your luck, your father, uh, their luck depends on their forefathers and their blessings. Kind of obvious, right? I mean, from the blessing from the Pitris flows to the father, from the father it flows to you. Also, your luck increases the more education you get or the more tapa or penances you do, which is again a fifth house thing. Uh, Fifth house is your own penance, your own tapa, your own, you can say, spiritual aura, which you gain with your own efforts. And fifth house is also your authority. I mean, the moment you are in the good books of the government, or you basically have some authority of your own, which is again a fifth house thing, or your forefathers had some authority, which is again a fifth house thing, which is power that you derive through your lineage. You'll start seeing that. I mean, you're luckier, right? I mean, that luck will now transform to your ninth house. So that's how this energy flows between the fifth and ninth house. Okay. Let's get to the 10th house, profession, karma, office. So 10th house is your karma sthan. We've already discussed that. Uh, Roughly, people tend to say that this is your office, but then you do karma throughout your day, and you're doing this of accord, depending on the kind of duty that comes across to you. And I mean, your karma with your wife is different compared to the office; it is different. But then it's all karma. So 10th house is called the karma sthan. Uh, let's assume, for the lack of a better word, call it the office space, which is the work or duties that you do officially, which get recognized, which get the visibility. So 10th house luck is basically dependent on your 6th house. And how is it dependent, and how does this luck actually flow? Now 6th house is the house of your daily routine, your parishram. Shram means the hard work that you do every day. And the harder you work, I mean, the lucky you get in terms of being able to finish what you have set out to do in your karma sthan, which is your office. So sixth house, the effort, struggle, competition, and the more you are able to basically put in effort over there, the more you are able to basically perform better in your karma sthan, which is your 10th house, which is very easy to logically fit together. Sixth house is also the house of scarcities. Scarcities means things which are not very publicly available, or they are scarce in amount. In the sense, say if you're going for a competition, I mean, a few 100,000 people give the exam, but there may be a few hundred or just a few thousand seats which need to be filled. So whenever you're trying to fight for a scarce resource, that's when the sixth house basically starts getting activated. So you are trying to, you have limited resources for which basically you are trying to compete. So the more you are able to successfully compete, the more you are able to basically perform your karma, or you can say your work better, because now you are more competent, I would say. The more you are able to struggle, the more you're able to work hard, the more you're able to set your daily routine. That's when basically your 10th house starts performing better. The luck starts flowing. 6th house is also the house of Roga, Shatru, Seva. So more you are able to struggle, the more you are able to overcome your obstacles, your debts, your enemies, the better you'll be able to perform in the 10th house. I mean, the 10th house is jungle. 4th house is your what gives you sukha, but 10th house is what basically, I wouldn't say gives you dukh or pain, but it's a jungle. So in a jungle, basically, you have to be extremely competent to be able to survive. The office space is the corporate jungle, which we need to survive. So the more competent you are, the more self-discipline you have, the more your daily routine is under your control, the more you better you will perform over there. The luck will start flowing towards the 10th house matter. So, and moving over to the 11th house. 11th house is typically your desires, large celebrations, large organizations, and desires, which are basically huge desires to the extent that you could call them obsessions, addictions, whatever you want to call them. The Bhagya of the 11th house is related to the 7th house. Now, why is it related to the 7th house? I mean, the 7th house is the house of public image. Also, 7th house is the Jaya sthan. When you declare victory over your opponents, which is again a 7th house thing. So, the moment you have a duel or some kind of a public, you can say, open battle with somebody, it's a 1 in 7 axis event that's happening. The more you are able to decimate or overcome your open enemies, that's when your 11th house of desires opens up. Your luck towards fulfilling your desires gets better, because the only obstacle that was standing between you and the fulfillment of your desire was the opponent that you had, that was there in between. But not only that, the better you perform on a public platform, which is basically your 7th house, the more you do successful public dealings, and the better you deal with people in a social setting, the more successful partnerships that you have, the better a public image you have, all 7th house portfolios, the more your desires are going to get fulfilled, which is again your 11th house thing. So the Bhagya, the luck, will start moving towards your 7th house. Now, many people could say, okay, in order to make my 7th house better, what do I need to do? Start having better relationship with your wife, start having better relationship with your partner, and you will see that your 11th house with desires start basically getting fulfilled. So 7th and 2nd, I mean, both are called Lakshmi Sthan. I mean, Shukra is basically called one of the incarnations of, not incarnations, I would say, basically the houses of Shukra are basically also called Lakshmi Sthan, because the more you are able to keep Lakshmi happy, the more your desires will get fulfilled, the higher up in life you will actually go. This is how this energy is actually flowing. Okay. And moving over to the last house, which is the 12th house, the house of exits, moksha. Sometimes you call it losses, sometimes you can call it charity, sometimes you can say some way in which basically something got taken away from you because of some pending karma from previous births, that you owed something to somebody. 12th house is also the house of creativity, things which basically you can imagine in your mind. I mean, you can't see, but it's there in your subconscious somewhere, and then you project it onto a real life image, or you can say onto some real life artifact. That's 12th house thing. So how does Bhagya of the 12th house relate to the 8th house? Uh, Now, if you look at the portfolio of 8th house, I mean, 8th house is destruction and transformation. And till your false ego is not broken, that you can say a first and 8th house thing, which is basically your Mars. First house is you, your body coming into being, and 8th house is destruction of the same, again ruled by Mars again and Ketu. So till you do not understand this cycle of death transformation, you will not be able to get to a stage of nirvana or moksha. Why? Because till your image is not broken, that your body is not your permanent abode, till you don't go through, undergo that painful transformation which 8th house brings through, the bhagya of moksha, which is basically sitting in the 8th house, is not going to come to you. Till you don't give your identity away, till you don't realize that everything, so the exact word in Hindi is called a kshanabhangur, things which can get destroyed in the instance of an eye. Till these are not basically taken care of, or that blessing of the 8th house, that you can handle that 8th house energy, till that is not flowing, your moksha is not going to happen. Now, 8th house is also the house of deep knowledge. I mean, before I get to that, 8th house is the house of transformation, and for you to be able to creative, you should learn how to transform things. You should learn how to go deep into things. The deeper you are able to go, the more you are able to basically transform things, the better you will be at your creativity, which is again a 12th house thing. And 8th house is also the hidden or the dark side of things. And 12th house is the house of freedom, peace. Again, a fourth house thing, Sukha, but then 12th house is basically final liberation. So, till you do not see or understand how to handle the 8th house energy, which is hidden, which is the dark side of things, things which are unknown, the occult, deep research. Also in Hindi, it's called Good Vidya. Good means or Gehen Vidya, in the sense something which is hidden, which is very deep. Till you can't handle that energy, your liberation is not possible, and your moksha is not possible. And you're also not going to exit this cycle of birth and death till you basically face all your fears, which are sitting in the 8th house. Once you're able to face all your fears and you're able to undergo transformation and be able to handle energy, your 12th house is kind of blessed. Another thing which people should remember, that 12th house is also the house of independent decision making. And when you start taking decisions independently, you will start realizing that till you can't handle losses, sudden changes, sudden transformations, because the world tomorrow is going to change, it's not under your control, your independent decision making is going to be very shaky. So so this is so this in a nutshell kind of covers how the ninth from a certain house controls the house itself, the bhagya of that house itself. I hope this topic, although it's very tricky, I hope it was interesting. Please do share your feedback and share your comments as to what value these videos are bringing to you. I would love to hear it down in the comment section and feedback. Thank you so much.